to the Life is an Escape Room podcast, where learning about yourself is an adventure. Here's your hosts, the Eanes escapeletes, Chris and Jeff.
Hello, fellow escapeletes. I'm Chris.
And I'm Jeff. And today we'd like to welcome Bonnie and Mark.
Hello.
Hello.
Before we jump into the topic, can you share a little bit about yourselves?
Mark, I'll let you go first.
So I'm Mark. I'm one of the owners here, along with Bonnie, Trapped in the Upstate. We're located here in Greer, South Carolina. We've been in business since July of 21. We are about to open our sixth game, so very excited about that. We're also eyeballing maybe a new location. I have a background mostly in retail management. I was vice president of a pretty large national franchisee of operations, and that's kind of where I get my business background from. I did that for about 17 years, and very entrepreneurial. I can't say that word very well. So really looked for an opportunity to do our own thing, and unfortunately, COVID in a way gave us that opportunity. So that's pretty much a little bit about myself. We got 3 lovely children, 11, 9, and about to be 5-month-old. She's actually wearing an escape room enthusiast onesie right now. I dressed her this morning. So this is a little bit about me and about us. Bonnie?
And Bonnie.
So first of all, she's about to be 6 months old.
Or 6 months.
She is 6 months old today, actually.
Oh.
I'm Bonnie, and most of my background is in counseling. So I am a licensed clinical addiction specialist and licensed addiction counselor in North and South Carolina. I still do clinical supervision for clinicians that are in process to get licensed. So I do a lot of training and teaching and things like that. That's kind of my little part-time job. And that's what I did for about 13 years. And prior to that, worked a lot of retail management. My parents were both entrepreneurs, so I saw that. I saw the backside of that, and I swore on everything holy I would never open a business because I saw how hard it was and how much they struggled. But then, like Mark said, COVID happened. He had moved here from Austin and was trying to figure out something to do. There weren't many jobs to be had. So he had sold his house in Austin, and I was like, hey, you've got a big chunk of money. You have no job. You want to open a business. Now would be the time to do that. So after, tossing around several business ideas, we decided, to open Trapped after playing a horrible escape room somewhere else. That kind of left a horrible taste in our mouth. We're like, we can do this better. Like, we can do this better than that. So,
This person's been in business this long with this.
Yeah. We
could do this.
Yeah. We had fallen in love with escape rooms, and you guys know how that goes. We decided to do that. And then ironically enough, or maybe it was fate, we opened the day after. Our opening day was the day after I was laid off from my job, literally the next day. So they had, offered to move me into a different position and do all of that. But I was like, I got this escape room thing going, and, we're really busy, and we are hoping that this is going to be our bread and butter. And so, I'll just take the severance and the layoff and move forward and do that. And it just happened to be, the day after was our opening day. And so we've been in business now for, July will be 2 years, and like Mark said, working on our 6th room. And I understand my parents' stress in the entrepreneurial world now. It's definitely really, 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 really hard and very stressful, but I don't think I could ever go back to a 9-to-5, working for someone else. Like, I just, I've been fully self-employed, for almost 2 years now. And it's worth it. It is worth it, even though it's really hard and stressful.
I so relate.
Yes.
I so relate.
Well, we were talking about that too. We had an employee meeting actually last weekend, and they all went around saying why they like working here. And it was like, it was those moments, where we call them our kids.
Because it's an escape
They're our
room.
work kids, But it's those moments where there's talk about all these great things about working here, and it's like, oh, we created that, So that's pretty cool.
Nice.
Yeah. So for our listeners and viewers, we met Mark and Bonnie at Trapped in the Upstate, which they'll share a little bit more about that in a bit. But we played all their games. We so love them.
Thank you.
Yes.
And we wanted to have you on the podcast. So as enthusiasts, as game owners, as well as masters, you've game mastered games, I'm sure, right?
Yes.
Through your business.
A lot.
We thought you would have a wonderfully unique experience about things that we learn about ourselves in escape rooms that we can apply to real life. And today we thought we'd talk about when those emotions are high. So could you maybe start out with a story or two, maybe one that you've experienced yourself or one that you observed? Not sharing names or anything like that, obviously.
Sure.
For the guilty, like I don't share Jeff's name or my name sometimes, but we know who we're
She
talking
just says
about.
her husband.
Right.
That's it. No one would guess it was me.
So, a time when you saw that emotions were high and maybe just some interesting tidbits.
Yeah. So I use this example and when I'm talking about therapy and stuff too with my counselors. But I was playing a game with my husband one time. And the game involved, like a lot of escape room puzzles, a puzzle that involved two separate pieces of information, right? So there's two pieces of information that needed to be put together to solve a puzzle. And it was kind of like a whodunit type puzzle that we were looking at. And he had one piece of information and I had the other. And literally two pieces of paper was literally what it was. And I had one piece, he had the other piece. We're working away. We both were convinced that we had this puzzle figured out. Convinced. So
we were also running out of time. That's where the emotions were.
Yep.
And we're very competitive in escape rooms. We want to beat it.
Well, and furthermore, we had already had an argument in that same game about another puzzle. So we were already kind of like snippy and like wound up like from the first, and that was literally the first puzzle we started arguing about. So it was like, and I to this day still don't know that we did that puzzle right. Like he was convinced that you had to do something. I'm like, I don't think that's right. That doesn't make sense. We did it and it kind of worked, but I still don't know that that's what we were supposed to do. I think it just worked out that way, but I don't know. I could be wrong. We didn't ask. We didn't ask. They didn't say it was wrong. So I'm just going to assume that it was right. But anyway, so we were already like kind of wound up that we were running out of time. We weren't doing very well in this game. We had already had a fight and not a fight, but you know what I mean? A tiff at the beginning.
Yeah.
And so
disagreement.
So we get to this point and we both got this convinced. So we start to tell each other what we think the answer is. And the end result was you were supposed to use the two pieces together. You were not supposed to separate. So when we started to talk about like, oh, I've got it figured out. I figured out who like the mystery man was, is what, kind of what we're doing. And he was like, well, no, that doesn't make sense because this says the mystery man is this. And I'm like, but this says it's this. So we're back and forth. And finally, I think the game master finally gave us a clue. Like, we weren't going to ask for help because, we're too stupid to do that. Like, so he finally just gave us a clue. I was like, you might want to use those pieces of paper together. And then when we started to really go through it, like, oh, that's what we were missing. And so we were able to like finally solve it and move forward. And when we were talking about this podcast, like, we talked about that story in particular because like in relationships, like we even talked about this last night, like in relationships, that's what happens a lot of time with miscommunications, right? Is that I have my information and you have your information and we hold our own information to ourselves and don't share it with each other. We expect the other person to just know or be able to solve the problem based off their information instead of giving them our information. And so that's, I think what leads to a lot of miscommunication, especially in relationships, is not sharing that information. So we talked about, afterwards, when we left, we were like, okay, let's regroup. Like, we need to have a game plan going in. We need to communicate, our kind of motto is like communicate out loud and often, right? Like talk
Yes.
to each other constantly, call it out constantly. Don't sit there quietly solving puzzles. We see that in players too. His
Yeah.
sister just came in with his nephews and played some of our games. And we were noticing that his older nephew was actually really good at solving puzzles and figuring things out. But he was just kind of like quietly going around and doing it. And then, his little brother would jump in and be like, what are you guys doing? Or, Mark's sister would come in and be like, hey, what are you working on? And he would finally tell her. But it's like, if he would have been communicating before, more often, then she would already be looped in and she could have been helping him that whole time. So we kind of gave them that feedback.
Well,
Absolutely.
not just that story though. That happens all the time where emotions are high, you're stressed out, people are wanting to get through the game. They're excited. That's also an emotion too, right? They're excited. That's how I
Absolutely.
get too. I get excited about a puzzle, hoping I can get it done.
Yeah.
And they won't communicate when it's like, Bonnie might have that other 10% I'm missing to put this all together. Even if I have all the
Yeah.
physical items I need for the puzzle, if we're not communicating and working together, then we're not going to be as successful. That's one of the things where my mind was going was we realize even when we bring our kids have probably played about 50 to 60 escape rooms.
That's
They
awesome.
a week like huddle before and say, okay, you do this, you work on this, we're going to do this, we're all going to communicate, we're going to put everything in this part in the room, and we have a game plan. We are much more successful, and it is way less stress. Like we can just
Oh,
pace around the room, taking our time, and it seems to be more enjoyable of an experience. And I think that could apply to other areas in life too.
absolutely. Think of the life lessons they're getting
Oh,
right
yeah.
now. This is awesome.
When you're watching well, first of all, that was a great example.
Yeah.
But when you're watching players in your room playing games and you see that the emotions are starting to build and they're starting to either pull apart or sort of go after each other, what have you observed are the best ways for them to recover from that? How do the successful teams,
Well,
how have you seen
yeah,
them get over that?
that's actually an interesting thing to ask too, because one of the things we'll try to do and teach our game masters is like I had a family in our asylum game last weekend, and the kid was saying, "Hey, do you want to ask for a clue?" And the parents are like, "No," but you could see they're building up and getting angry and like getting frustrated, and they're not making very much progress. I said, "We have an audio clue we can send," and I said, "Just send the audio clue." She's like, and the game master was like, "Well, the son just asked them." They said, "No." I said, "But they don't know what they need, and this is what they need." Like, and you can
Yeah.
literally see once they got that lock undone of that puzzle, like a lightness come over them. You know what I mean? And they started kind of smiling, working together. So I would say the best way to recover for us is to be proactive and try not to let teams get that frustrated. Try to
Yeah.
pay close enough attention that you can point them in the right direction. Or sometimes we'll even type up a clue where it's kind of indicating for them to all work on it together. Especially the voodoo game, I do that all of the time. I'll kind of make
I love that game.
the first puzzle. I tell people like you're gonna be more successful if you work together, and then they'll get it right. So it's. I think those are some of the strategies. I don't know what other strategies you could think of, Bonnie.
Well, as far as like players, like things that they do, we, obviously as game masters try to help and get people moving and things like that. But as players, like what I've seen players do is, like take a deep breath, take a step back, let's see what we have, what all have we used, what have we not used, like things like that. And also we even in a couple of our games, actually 3 of our games now have a built-in, method of giving them extra time, and it's part of the story, if it's
Ooh.
needed. Of course you guys like killed it and you didn't need any extra time. You played our games and you didn't experience.
I love that you do that
Yes.
though. I love
Yes.
that you
Well,
do
we
that.
have a
Yeah.
30-minute window between games. So like even, if there's a team after
Smart.
them, we have plenty of time to reset. Like we can always give people extra time as long as they didn't start late. If they got there late
Yeah.
and things
Right,
like
right.
that, it's like, sometimes we can't do that. But we will give them that extra time, and you can see the immediate relief that comes over them when they are on that final puzzle and they're like watching the clock tick down and it hits that ending and they get like a, you're going to earn 5 extra minutes by doing a funny dance or whatever. And they do it. They're lighthearted. Now they're happy and they're dancing and they're doing their thing. And then they, once they get done, they'll be like, okay, so what did we have? And then they can like start fresh because they had that like timeout to also remember this is just a game. It is not, I mean, we had one group where we couldn't even give them the extra time because they were yelling at each other so much they hear us tell them they were going to get extra time. And one of them just walked out. I don't mean walked into the lobby. I mean, walked out the front door, got in their car and left. And then before the game was even over. And when they came out, one of the ladies even said, she was like, we're like, hey, are you guys okay? Like, is everything, whatever. She was like, friendships were lost today. And I'm like, this is a game, guys. It's not that big of a deal. But again, like going back to that, relating that to life, like how often do we get in fights about like, leaving the seat up or like trivial little things because we get triggered and we get, something like that happens. And then we will have a knockdown drag out. And it's like, this is over the laundry. Like, what are we doing? Like, it's very similar in escape rooms when you can kind of back up and say, okay, this is a game. It's okay. It's supposed to be fun. It's not supposed to be, a life or death.
Bonnie, in Wilmington, we were playing a game and we were not doing very well. And Bonnie was like about to just give up. And I said, she was sitting down in the game. And I said, hold on, time out. Everyone come here. What do we have? And then we literally got back on track and we actually ended up beating the game. So
I was surprised.
15 minutes, 20 minutes into a hard game without solving a single puzzle. Great game. It was not a game design issue at all. It was us not putting things together. And it was another situation where the first puzzle we needed to do, Bonnie had messed with it, but it's a puzzle I'm good at. And if she had called me over there, I would have figured it out. And that's also something too, when emotions are high, I realize is, I can look at this and say, okay, this is not my puzzle. Bonnie, come here. This is yours. Yes. As much as my ego wants me to be the hero and solve it, I can't always do that. I know my limitations. At least I try to.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, I could see a huge lesson. Well, many huge lessons, right? To real life. But one is changing the emotions, right? Yeah. Have some sort of intervention. Like, Mark had said, let me focus on this or change this. Or Bonnie, introducing that time limit. So, and Jeff and I do that too. We'll have a sign that when emotions are high or when they get a certain way, one of us will signal the other one, and then we'll realize, okay, we need to change the mindset, right? Because as I'm sure you've observed and we've all felt that when you're trying to solve problems in a negative frame of mind, it's not going to happen, right? You got to get that emotional release, those positive emotions to go after something more. Have you noticed that as well with yourselves and others, that people that tend to be happier or just more or less negative emotions tend to be more successful in escape rooms and life?
Yeah, I mean, think about a time when you worked at a job and think about who you saw get promoted. It's usually the person that's has a great attitude and tries really hard. It's like I tell people too, even when I was vice president, like if you work hard, you have a great positive attitude, I can do everything else. I could teach you everything else. Yeah, those are like the basic foundations that I can't teach you. Like you have to have that. And also, too, going back to what you said, too, about a signal, there's a family that comes in here, a dad and 2 daughters. If they listen to this, they're going to know who they are probably. But they've played all of our games. They're enthusiasts. And they will get a little angry at times. And they have a signal, too, that they use. And I'll see the daughters do it. And dad will say, okay. He sees it. He recognizes it. And then he'll change kind of his demeanor, if you will. And I actually told Bonnie about that afterwards. I thought that was really effective use. Is that something we need to even think about as a family when we're playing escape rooms? Yeah. Because I can get really frustrated with the kids sometimes, and I need to remember that it's just a game and that they need to be having fun. And so it's kind of interesting that you had mentioned that. There are people that work at a nearby escape room that are very good at escape rooms. And there are 3 of them that come and play our games, and they are the most cheer-free, lighthearted. Even walking around the room, I tell a joke about Bonnie, like just like spinning the umbrella and Lizzie around, and then just solve a puzzle and go back to spinning it around. Like They set the record in all of our games, and they're just having fun the entire time and just so
Yeah.
lighthearted and just having a great time and trying to enjoy their full hour. Um,
Yeah.
and I think that you see people being more successful in both arenas, where those both would relate to each other.
Well, not just that, but they not only are they better at escape rooms, but like one of them was nominated for a bullseye for Game Master of the Year. Like they get tons of Google reviews
Wow.
because they're just very positive. Like they're the
Actually,
most
speaking
chill,
positive,
friendly
we can say
people.
his name. They probably know him. Josh, an escape artist. I'm sure you met Josh.
Oh,
He's
okay.
a
Yep.
fantastic
Yeah,
guy.
yeah.
Like it's just the greatest.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was him in our game. Just having fun and just
Oh.
playing so well. And it was like also those people that come in to have and are really having a blast. They're our favorite people, the
Hmm.
game master. Our
Yeah.
favorite. It's not the people that blow through the puzzles or get everything without a clue. That's cool, but like the people that are just having fun, like that. I have a
Yes.
recording. It's on our social media somewhere. This big group, an illusionist. Remember that, Bonnie? And they're like having a blast. And he's like, "All right, you guys remember when you solve stuff in that game, a really loud ta-da goes off. Goes ta-da, really loud." And so they know they're about to solve something. They're like, all right, you can hear them in the hallways. All right, go, ta-da! And you hear them go, rah! Just cheering so loud. And they were so much fun. I will never forget that team. And just stuff like that too. I think that not only when you're positive and enjoyable, is it better for the people in your immediate circle, but even your further extended circle. Those
Right,
people
right.
also
Yeah,
Absolutely.
find you more joyful and more fun to be around. And
yeah,
their positivity wore off on me that night, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Mhm.
yeah,
At home and at work,
Yeah.
right?
yeah,
It totally fits. Yeah. And we actually use that sign outside of escape rooms as well
Mhm.
when one of
yeah.
us seems to be getting a little grumpy or whatever.
I know what
Well,
you're
you
talking
Hey, me too. For me too.
about. Well, we definitely notice when people are getting tired, just emotionally
Yeah.
tired. There's times uh, when you're hyper focused in an escape room, so
Hmm.
you can see it building because you're expecting it. But when you're not in an escape room, it's the same signs. It's just it
Yeah.
might not be as intense.
Yeah.
Right.
So it's definitely
Yeah.
something you can apply
Yeah,
other
it helps with
places
empathy too.
Yes.
if people
Yeah.
are getting stressed. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Giving them some space to just, okay, go do what you
Yeah.
got. Go
Yeah.
emote.
Yeah.
Well,
Exactly. Yeah.
and the other side of that too that we had talked about is having that game plan beforehand. Also, if you think
Hmm.
about that
Right.
too, whether
Yeah.
it's work or life or projects at home, right? It's getting together and saying, "Hey, here's the plan before we go to do this activity," and having clear
Yeah.
communication. I think also has a positive influence and impact on whatever that may be, whether it be a project for the day or something you need to get
Yeah.
accomplished, a honey-do list, whatever it might be. Um, and that was one of the things too we discussed last night that we should probably get a better practice at doing that. We use the example of like the Myrtle. We're about to go to Myrtle Beach
Mhm.
on vacation.
Okay.
Doing that each day with the kids and saying, all right, here's the game plan through the day. Actually, we're going to give them a printout because they like to ask us 16 times a day what they're doing. So printed itinerary, but even taking that out of our escape room
Yeah.
experience and just doing that little huddle with them out in the real world too, I think would be a positive for our family.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, it's
Wow.
always
Yeah.
better to
Good
be
And
idea.
yes,
proactive than reactive in any situation, but
yes.
especially when, emotions get high, the reaction is not
Hmm.
usually beneficial for anyone. I mean, you
Right.
get triggered by something, your body goes into fight or flight, and your
Hmm.
options become very limited. So you guys were talking about before, like how well people play or don't play when they're like emotional or they're
Hmm.
negative or things like that. Like there's a
Yeah.
psychological like reason why our brain narrows options when we get like when
Hmm.
our fight or flight reflex is
Right.
triggered, because when when you're in danger, you
Yeah.
can't consider options, right? That's why it's fight or flight.
Right.
Right.
So in escape rooms it's kind of like that too. When you get triggered like that and your emotions get really high, then the number of options you have narrows, and so being able to solve
Yeah.
puzzles with lots of moving pieces and stuff like that, it gets really, really hard. So
Yeah.
being
Right.
proactive to where that doesn't happen, or having that signal of like, hey, I'm feeling some type of way, like I'm getting emotional, I'm getting upset or whatever. All of those things are important. We don't necessarily have a signal, like a wave or a safe word or like anything like that, but we do have kind of we're more direct with each other, I think, like or at least I am. I'll just be like, I don't like that. Stop, don't do that. And it's like, but also part of that is we've already talked about it before, because in other instances where we have been triggered or we have had disagreements or arguments or things like that, this is another escape room thing, we debrief. Right? Like once the emotions are calmed down, once the room is over, we can talk about it. We can be like, hey, you said this, or you talked to me like that. I really didn't like that. It made me feel this way. And, in the future, if there's an issue like that, I would prefer you to approach me like this. So we have those conversations. And again, with escape rooms, it's like, it helps in the next room and we perform better typically. But in relationships, it's like vital to stay together, is that you have to have those debriefs after a fight or after a disagreement, so that you can grow from that. And if we hadn't had that, done that early on in our relationship, well, I don't know that we would be here right now. There was a lot, just
could you imagine
relationship? Like you don't know, like you don't know what you don't know, right?
I
Absolutely.
would say at home and at work, right?
Absolutely.
Just if people talked more about how well they worked together or lived together or just communicated together, the world would be a different place.
Totally.
Oh, yeah.
Totally.
Now, I can't believe how fast the time has gone.
Yes.
Before we get to your final piece of advice, can you share a little bit more about what you have to offer for our listeners and viewers?
Sure. Well, we kind of mentioned we own Trapped in the Upstate in Greer, South Carolina. So it's not too far from downtown Greer, which is a beautiful area. Lots of restaurants. They call it like a Hallmark, downtown. Very pretty, very quaint, very Southern. So we're pretty close to that. And we have a pretty large facility. Like we said, we have 5 rooms that are open right now, with a 6th that's going to be built. The 6th one is going to be our cabin themed, very family friendly, kind of like throwback type room. It's going to be super, super fun. We're doing some new things that we've never done before in that game. So we're really excited about that. Anything you want to add, Mark?
Yeah. To the enthusiasts though that do listen, they like to come to Greenville. We are lucky enough to share our market with the very great escape artists of Greenville. And my only thing is, I would just like to pitch, when you come play their games, come play some of ours as well. A lot of people just don't know that we're here. They don't. We just had some enthusiasts that played over 600 games that live like 3 hours away, and they said, we just found out you guys were here, or we would have came sooner. So I'd like to just kind of throw that out there. And I think that you can find us on www.trappedupstate.com. All of our social medias are also Trapped Upstate. And come check us out.
On Morty as well. That's how we found you when we were near escape artists.
Hey, how great is that,
by the way? So if you're there, it's worth the drive.
Oh, yeah.
It's awesome.
Love Morty.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Love Morty.
Well, so we're at the end. So what is your final piece of advice for our viewers and listeners? What would you give as a piece of advice?
I think for me, my main piece of advice is just about communicating in general, like being sure to communicate. Like, I think that's the biggest barrier in communication, is just not doing it, right? Like holding it inside, or, not asking for help. That's another escape room thing we didn't even talk about. You know what I mean? It's like when you're struggling and emotions are high and you're dealing with problems, like ask for help. Ask for a clue, right? Like, don't just continue to spiral. So really just making sure that we communicate, and then setting boundaries too with each other. We talked about kind of having those signals or having those things, like those are boundaries, and those are like, gates that we put up around our emotions and our needs and things like that. So communicating that as well to everyone around us, right? Not just your partner, your escape room friends, but like anyone in your life. Like communicating and setting boundaries is like the utmost important thing to remember when it comes to communication. So that would be my main takeaway from all of this?
Yeah, I think mine is along the same lines, but I would say don't be afraid to ask for what you need. And
Mm,
that goes to
absolutely.
escape rooms and in life. Don't be afraid to ask your partner, your boss, hey, this is what I need. We just had some
Mm,
people in one of our games that's a little dim. I told them beforehand, we have some little lights we can give people. Just ask us. We'll be more than happy to make your game more comfortable
yeah.
however we can, right? At the end of the day, you're the
Right.
customer. We're going to do everything we can to make it more
Hmm.
enjoyable for you. So, don't be afraid to ask for what you need and tell people what you need, what makes you happy.
Right.
Oh, I love it.
Great advice. Yes.
Yes. Oh, thank you so much, Bonnie and Mark, for joining us today and sharing your wisdom.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
for having us.
Want to learn more about the Eanes escapeletes, buy the book, or read the blog? Visit lifeisanescaperoom.com.